A tall gray phased through a floating white chair. She wore a long, long dress with the same shade of royal blue as the shorter grays. She was looking right at me. I knew the voice came from her somehow. Upon her saying that, all fear and pain washed away from my body. Even though there were tools and needles in my head at that point, I felt calm, happy, comfortable even. Now, this is very interesting because here we sort of, touch on a little bit of this female entity again that was described by Whitley Strieber and so many others. You have a taller, like gray that seems to be somewhat in charge, at least, of the procedure. It stayed like that for what felt like a couple more minutes. With me happy, the woman staring at me, and the 4 grays touching my head with tools. Eventually, though, the 4 grays stopped working on me. I, still paralyzed, suddenly started being lifted in the air. The bottom of the room lit up in a blinding light. And before I knew it, I was back in my backyard, except this time I was levitating in the air while the 4 grays before were nearby me. It was still nighttime when the grays walked towards my house. They opened my back door without even touching it and levitated both me and themselves through the house. Soon enough, they placed me in my bed, causing me to fall asleep. I woke up at 5 a.m., sleeping on my back in my bed while my sheets were straightened, which isn't normal at all. I normally sleep on my side and my sheets aren't straightened when I wake up. This is something that shows up quite a bit as well in abductions. You hear about people who've gone camping and suddenly wake up, their clothes are outside or their pants are on backwards or their shoes are on the wrong feet or their shoes have dirt on them and they're in their bed, like kind of a botched operation sometimes. They don't know exactly that we're creatures of habit and will recognize these things. Between my first and second abduction, I had nightmares. Repeated nightmares. Looking back, many of these nightmares depicted a distorted form of my first abduction. However, my memories were initially wiped of my first abduction, so I wasn't able to figure out the source of these strange nightmares. Oftentimes, my nightmares featured me being in a dark room, pursued by shadowy figures, and being entirely helpless. Interesting little moment here, because so many experiencers, whether abductees or whether just people who come in contact with these beings, sometimes they depict them having blurry faces or wearing a mask or being shadowy. Almost like there is some type of psychic alteration that they're capable of doing. Like they don't actually have to wear a mask, that they can just change your perception of them in a way that distorts your memory of them. Everything changed, though, when I learned how to lucid dream at age 13. Being sick of nightmares, I searched for ways online to try to get rid of nightmares, and one of those things was lucid dreaming. For whatever reason, I picked up lucid dreaming absurdly quick. I had sleep paralysis, but only twice before I learned how to lucid dream nearly consistently. Within a month, I went from having constant, uncontrollable nightmares to having pleasant, lucid dreams almost every night. If you're someone out there that suffers from sleep paralysis, there definitely is a lot of literature on how to roll out of that because you're essentially in the out-of-body state. You just don't know how to leave your body, so you're kind of confined and panicking. But apparently there's some work there that you guys can look into. I've never had sleep paralysis. I have had multiple out-of-body experiences, but I know that even those out-of-body experiences are terrifying, so I can imagine how much more so it would be if you couldn't move during that event. How you guys liking this so far? I think this is interesting. For unknown reasons, I also began to have dreams that predicted the future. Most often, they would depict a storm like a tornado or thunderstorm about 3 days before some of these storms appeared. I've also had dreams predict the bodies, but not faces, of people I would meet in the future and my relationship with them, most often friends. And even dreams predict rooms that I'd be in, despite me having never been in said rooms. These clairvoyant dreams happened once every couple of weeks, uncontrollably, and would feel stronger than a normal dream or even a lucid dream. Regardless, as time went on, I improved my lucid dreaming skills more and more over the next few years. As I grew to ages 14, 15, and 16, my control over my dreams became stronger and more effortless. Now, that seems to track. If you're into lucid dreaming, it is something you can practice. There's work by a parapsychologist by the name of Rupert Sheldrake as well that really talks about how some dreams have precognitive elements in them, and that he encourages dream journaling, which is basically keeping a journal by your bedside, and any recollection you have of the dream, just write it down, because those memories fade pretty quickly, as I'm sure most of you know, and that if you jot down some of the elements that are present in these dreams, you might find that some of them might actually end up being precognitive, meaning they predict things that will happen. We've also seen precognitive events in out-of-body states. I made a 3-part series on the gateway and leaving your body. In the 3rd part, we talked to Graham Nichols, who left his body and during then witnessed an explosion on Old Compton Street in London. This was witnessed by 5 other people, that he told 5 other people about this. And then 5 days later, an actual bomb exploded at that very location, the pub that he said it was going to explode in. I don't dismiss the precognitive idea so quickly. This is going to be the forefront of science in a few years, I guarantee it. Then came my second abduction. I went to sleep on the night of April or May in 2019. I was 16 then. At the time, I had papers stuck in my right ear. A bit of a weird story, but I have a hearing sensitivity due to my autism. And before I chose to get noise-canceling headphones, I would block out noise by covering my ears with crumpled paper. One of the crumpled bits got stuck in my right ear, though, so oops. Anyways, unlike last time where I was conscious on my trip from the craft, I simply appeared standing in a small corridor of sorts. At first, I tried to check if I was dreaming, which I do by attempting to manipulate the world, checking my hands to see if they look normal, etc. But to my surprise, it seemed as though I wasn't dreaming. To my left of that corridor was a wall of several switches, lights, and latches. It looked sort of similar to the front of a really old computer of sorts. Naturally, I didn't bother touching any of them. To the right were 2 short grays, standing there in the same blue jumpsuits that I saw them before. I felt terrified at first, of course, especially since I forgot about my first abduction at that point. But then I saw the tall alien I met before, telepathically saying the same things she said before.
Calm down, my sweet child, my sweet little child.
My fear washed away as the 2 aliens and I walked towards her. The room we were in looked exactly like my abduction room, except I had 4 beige doors that looked like this. These doors are capable of sliding upwards for someone to go through them. The 2 aliens took similar metal tools to the ones they used last time, although they didn't stick any needles into my head or anything. They just quickly moved the tools around my body. The gray on the right did notice something in my right ear, though, and reached in using these metal clamps to pull it out. My first thought was, "Who are you, and what am I doing here?" Which she responded with,
I am your watcher. I will answer your other questions later.
Now follow me, she telepathically said, and I followed her through a beige door that opened by sliding upwards. The window showed outer space. It looked beautiful, but it was more or less space. My watcher told me to look at her, which I followed obediently. Staring into her big, deep eyes, I can tell her eyes weren't just pure black, but were rather a very, very dark blue. Her skin was also relatively a bit more green compared to the other shorter grays I saw earlier. After staring into her eyes for a bit, she then said that,
Now you can see.
I looked back through the window and my goodness, it was space, but far, far more magical. It looked like your typical artist's painting you'd see when searching up HD wallpapers of space. But somehow, even better than that. It's like I could see red-like hues, green and yellow-like hues, and purple-like hues that were hues that you normally couldn't see in real life. My watcher told me that this is what I could see if I could master my mind. I then woke up, laying on my back with straightened sheets once again. At the time, I woke up with no memory of what actually occurred, although I did notice later that day that the paper stuck in my right ear was completely gone. In addition, in the following years, I would have lucid dreams where I could see colors I couldn't see in real life. I was never sure where these dreams came from or why they happened, at least not until recently. So let's pause here for a second. I do have a base theory running currently, or a hypothesis that I'm kind of putting together based on a lot of research and a lot of stories and everything else. And something really rings true to me, which I'll eventually get into more deeply once I've really rounded off, the jagged corners of this hypothesis. But I believe to a certain extent that we are interacting with a system, that we're not directly interacting with the intelligence behind the system, but that this system does have an intelligence, just not one like you or me. It's an automated system, I think. It's very procedural, and this system, could be around for many different reasons at the same time, including possibly manipulating or maintaining the, human presence on this earth, among so many other things, maybe even the flora and fauna and all sorts of other things. But I think that that's kind of maybe what we're interacting with 50% of the time is this system. This system has these beings, these genderless beings that seem task-oriented, that, do these mundane tasks. They also have these larger beings that seem a little bit more empathetic, that are able to psychically calm you down, that are almost there to reassure you constantly so that the trauma perhaps doesn't affect, the test subject. If you go into an enclosure with a panda, a lot of times they dress up as pandas, not to alarm them, and they don't want to affect their natural habitat because they want that natural state to develop without their interference. And so maybe they're just trying to calm us down, right? And like wipe our memories so that everything remains. And they've seen that, if they don't do that, there's trauma and it kind of affects the subject. But anyways, so really three things happen. Three things that happen across the board with the abduction concerning these type of extraterrestrials, in regards to this system. It seems like three things happen. One, you get taken and experimented on, and I don't mean experimented as in they don't know what they're doing. I mean, there are procedures that happen. There are a variety of procedures that seem to be the same among abductees, but different between male and female, troubling procedures that do happen. Number two, after the procedure is done, you're given a tour of the ship. A lot of times, people are given a tour of the ship and are shown beautiful things. Kind of what's happening right now. Even in the case of Chris Bledsoe, he was given the tour where he said he was in a bubble looking around. They showed him the pyramids. They showed him all these beautiful things on Earth. These tours happen across the board, again. And the last thing they do, and I don't know if that's what we're going to get into, but the last thing they do is they show you terrible things. They show you nuclear blasts and famine and war. And, if you go back to Rua, Zimbabwe, the children that witnessed, the 60 some odd children that had witnessed this craft land, these beings come out and they were, psychically shown these images of the world ending. And so many other abductees, again, including Chris Bledsoe, were shown these terrible things as if saying, look what you're doing, smarten up, you need to change. It seems like that is pretty par for the course, and it seems like it might be an automated system at this point, because I think it's too frequent and it gives nothing. I suppose it adds reassurance to the person who is taken in that, hey, look, we're doing this for the greater good and we're actually taking care of you, and sort of leaving you with not such a foul taste in your mouth. And perhaps to some extent justifying the terrible things that they're doing to us. Like, no, we're not the bad guys. You're the bad guys. We're just trying to help you. Here, look how bad you are. And then we kind of leave being grateful and thankful for the horrendous procedures that were just done and the fact that we were stolen out of our beds. And so it does seem to be like some weird automated system. The second reason I believe that is because What has come from that? What has come from showing any of these people the end of the world? Nothing. These people they don't go on to, change the laws or what they grow up to speak at conferences to other people who are interested in UFOs, or they get so psychologically traumatized that they become reclusive and we don't hear about them. So surely they know that telling us these things won't change the world. Why continue to do it? Well, the answer is it's probably just programming. Hypothesis only. Sorry for that parentheses, that large parentheses. But this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit after reading, a lot of books on it. And it does seem to match up in a certain way. But let's see what this gentleman, or I don't even know, is this male or female, what this person has to say. 3 years later, 19 years old, I was abducted about 1 a.m. on October 30th, 2021, when the third abduction occurred. At this point in time, I was beginning to research about the UFO and UAP phenomena out of curiosity for the past month. Over time, however, I began to piece together that maybe, just maybe, a lot of weird things that occurred in my life, from my nightmares to my family's experiences, and being able to see strange shadow entities, among other issues, was entirely because of me being abducted. As I was walking downstairs to get a midnight snack, I saw the tall alien, my watcher, standing right by my front door. Judging by the height of the door that I measured after the abduction, I could tell that she's about 7'2" or 7'3", so 2.18 to 2.21 meters tall. Despite seeing an unwanted being in my house, seeing her made me feel calm somehow, as I heard the same phrase I heard before in my head.
Calm down, my sweet little child.
Wanting to get evidence, I lifted up my phone, which was in my hand at the time, and rushed to turn it on. But the instant I even thought to capture her on camera, she vanished.
Come downstairs,
I heard in my mind. I came downstairs, albeit cautiously. I had my phone on to capture them on camera and was ready to yell to wake up my parents if anything bad happened. The second I walked into my kitchen, though, I saw 4 short grays I saw earlier, and my vision blanked out. My first thought was to check if this was a dream by checking if my hands looked normal and trying to manipulate the world around me. I'm a pretty good lucid dreamer at this point, so I figured out how to discern dreams from reality. Both checks, however, seemed to suggest that this was, in some way, reality. My watcher said,
"Look at me."
And I looked. As she stared into my eyes and I into hers, my forgotten memories of my past abductions came flooding back.
I am your watcher.
Her voice echoed in my mind.
But you can call me Mama.
After that, I felt dizzy for a bit. She continued to stare at me while I had to close my eyes. Over the next couple of seconds, a dozen thoughts a second rushed into my mind.
I answered all of your questions,
she said, telepathically in her soothing voice. I'll list these questions and answers towards the end of the post to let the story continue. She then told me through a separate telepathic message that
we're contacting you because your family has great psionic potential. However, your anxiety is getting in the way.
She lifted me up in the air without lifting a finger and moved me across the room onto her lap, cradling me like a baby.
Look at me again.
Looking into her deep, dark blue eyes, I heard her in my mind say,
"Calm down, my sweet little child." Or should I say, "Calm down, my sweet little girl."
I must have had a positive reaction to the latter because she started repeating,
"Calm down, my sweet little girl,"
in my head over and over and over again. It felt soothing and euphoric, like I've never felt this comfortable in my entire life. Eventually, what seemed like hours, she said,
"If you ever get scared or feel pain, just think of me, your Mama, okay?"
The last words I heard before I fell asleep in her arms was, "I need to learn astral projection next. We'll come back once you mastered that." Weird. The whole mama thing is super weird, but the whole, I guess the whole motherly feminine energy perhaps is something that they feel deep down. It's what would soothe us the most, is like the voice of a mother cradling you. I think that would be the best way to calm anyone down. I couldn't think of a better way of feeling more comfortable than the feeling of, your mother cradling you, telling you it's going to be fine. Interesting strategy here to calm down the human. Suddenly, I woke up on the couch in my family room at 2:30 a.m., which was weird since I didn't even enter my family room from my memory. This was especially weird since I usually sleep from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or so. I'm never even remotely tired at this time. At first, I tried my best to dismiss what happened as a dream. It couldn't have happened, right? Wait, does this person sleep from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m.? They work the night shift or something? That's kind of a crazy sleep schedule, if you ask me. They did mention that they were autistic, so perhaps there's something there that leads them to be more of a nocturnal person. In addition, I suffered from daily headaches and body pains, which was diagnosed as fibromyalgia by a rheumatologist in February. Even though the headaches and pains have gotten better as I followed my doctor's treatment, these headaches and pains have never fully went away until this abduction incident. I have yet to have a headache or pain in my body since, and it's been nearly a week when I usually feel these pains daily. Well, that's interesting. The healing idea is something that comes up quite often as well. And again, I reference Chris Bledsoe because he's such a famous case, but there are so many other cases as well where people have felt that they've been either healed or cured of certain diseases. Here are the questions I asked my watcher and that she answered. Now we get into the Q&A, folks. Question: why did you abduct me? Answer:
We abduct your family line because you and your family have high psionic abilities. However, your relatives,
she showed an image of my dad and grandma in my mind,
have ignored the truth for religion. You're more open-minded.
Question: how long have you been following my family line? Answer:
237 years.
Question: why did my parents' car teleport? For context, my parents and I experienced our car teleporting to a completely different part of town while my dad was driving in May of 2015. Answer:
to save your parents' lives. If we didn't save your parents, this would interfere with your psychic abilities.
Whoa, that's crazy. There are accounts as well of people just driving, seeing a bright light or something, and then all of a sudden be driving in a different direction or in a different part of town or hours later. Betty and Barney Hill being a very famous case of that, but these things tend to happen pretty regularly. So if you've ever driven somewhere and had missing time, perhaps you were being saved. Why did you wait until now? Answer:
we knew you would come to the conclusion that you've been abducted. We waited until then, as well as you mastered your lucid dreaming.
Question: what is behind the 4 beige doors? Answer: the deck, the window, the pilot room, and the engine room. She made a map of what she believed the alien ship looked like. It's also really interesting because a lot of these ships, and this is very common once again, seem to manipulate space in a way that doesn't seem possible, where the inside of the craft actually appears to be much larger than the outside. Are there other rooms? Answer:
yes.
Can I see them? Answer:
no.
Question: what are you aliens? You grays? I like how she's like, you grays, bro? Answer:
for as long as you live, we cannot tell you or humanity.
This was also the answer to many other questions regarding the nature of the universe, their technology, where they live, etc. For as long as you live, we cannot tell you or humanity. Does tie into the whole future us thing. What if the future us, right, needs to fix something in the past, but we can't do it? Because that'll affect the future us. That'll make them become us, which is what we're trying to fix in the first place, right? So instead, we make these aliens that look nothing like us so that we don't even come to the conclusion that that could be us in the future. And that actually the future us just looks like us. You know, much like what Travis Walton witnessed when he had these little guys working on him. When he fought them off, he ended up encountering these humanoid-looking people who, you know, for all we know, hired a bunch of grays, you know, to do, you know, the mundane work. What technology do you use? Answer.
EM.
Electromagnetism, I presume.
And psionics. You wouldn't understand if we told you.
This was also a common answer to many other questions regarding the nature of the universe, their technology, where they live, etc. Question, is religion real? Answer.
Yes, all are to some degree.
All right. Question, if you're a watcher, what other aliens exist? Man, these are great questions. All right. Kudos to the person who wrote this. These are fantastic questions. Answer.
There are watchers/observers, those who reproduce, and others.
I personally call those who reproduce breeders. Question, would a reproducing alien abduct me? Answer.
No, that would interfere with your purpose. We specifically have you and your family marked to not reproduce with.
Question, what is my purpose? Answer.
To learn psychic abilities. You should also have children, preferably 3 or 4 if possible, given how well we predict you can handle children. But we won't force you to, since we know you don't want children. If you follow what we say, then this will be the best for both of us.
She then telepathically showed me clairvoyant visions, including a vision of what life career I should pursue. And it was an animator. What a future romantic partner of mine would look like, and a vision of me floating in space, seeing colors I normally couldn't see in real life. If I remember any more questions, I'll be sure to put them here. The psionic part is really interesting because this is 4 years ago. This is 2021, prior to a lot of the quote-unquote psionic talk we've been hearing about, you know, with Jake Barber and whatnot, and the whole Skywatcher thing. Yeah, I'd be curious to know where this person currently is, and if this person wants to reach out to me anonymously, I'd be happy to talk to them. You know, there's a comedian that said this who's like, we're at a point in civilization where we're trying to figure out how many screens we can put between us and the wall with like a TV, a laptop, a tablet, a phone, a watch, and then just augmented reality on the glasses. Just how many of these screens can we obey? Yeah, I don't think any of us will refute such an accusation. Question. Therefore, you are not the species of the evil one, as was remarked earlier? Answer. How am I supposed to answer that? Your people still think according to a simple and completely inappropriate scheme of generalizations. Simply put, there are absolutely no purely evil species. There exists in every terrestrial and extraterrestrial species alike both good and evil individuals. It's even true of your own people, but there is no such thing as an absolutely evil species. This conception is really very primitive. You people have believed from time immemorial what you are supposed to believe, what was foreseen for you to believe by your creators. You know, that's a really interesting point, and, you know, chalk one up for Lacerda on this one, because I do believe that that is accurate. We are often a little delusional in thinking that, you know, if we visited a planet, that they would all look the same, dress the same, and obey the same God and have all the same morals and principles. But unless they were a hive mind, that wouldn't be the case. You would have internal conflict and civil war, perhaps, or just varying different opinions. But again, you know, I do think that if a civilization developed the use of telepathy instead of spoken language, individuality would cease to exist, and you would probably see a lot more assimilation, sort of a lot less of this confliction, you know, that humans face. And so Lacerda saying that this is very primitive for you guys to think that every species, you know, shares one sort of objective view of reality. I don't think that it's that primitive. I think that probably out there in the universe, there are some extraterrestrials that, because of their immense capacity of telepathy, you just can't hide anything from anyone. And so you kind of have to become one, I would assume, right? Every well-known species, even the more highly developed ones, consist of a great number of individual consciousnesses. At least a portion of the consciousness is individual, even though there are connecting fields of consciousnesses. Whoa, okay, so never mind. She just completely destroyed my theory. She says that both can exist simultaneously. Well, that's interesting. These self-sufficient spirits are able to decide freely for themselves a lifestyle which is either good or evil, according to your own human standards. It depends again on the respective point of view. Your people are not necessarily in a position to judge whether the deeds of a much more highly developed species are good or evil because you stand at a lower observation point from which an assessment is not possible. Your simple words, good and evil, are in any case examples of a tendency towards generalization. In my language, there are many concepts for the various shades of the meaning of individual behaviors in comparison to the norm of a society. Great point. Yeah, good and evil definitely does sort of fit it into a neat little box. Black, white, good, evil, up, down, this binary view of everything. I definitely see how that can inhibit nuance, from existing. Even those extraterrestrial species which are inclined to act with antagonism towards you are not species of the evil one. Even though they operate negatively with respect to your own race, they do this for their own reasons and do not regard themselves as evil. Were your structured way of thinking more linear and more focused as theirs is, then you would also behave in such a fashion. The attitude of a species towards other kinds of existence naturally depends very heavily on its respective structured way of thinking. Each species sets its own priorities. To classify that as good or evil is really quite primitive, for the survival of any species argues for many varieties, among them your own, as well for even the most varied of the worst or negatively directed deeds. I won't even exclude my own kind in this regard, for there have been certain occurrences in the past which I don't personally welcome, but about which I would also not like to go into detail. None of these occurrences have happened in the last 200 years of your timescale. But please note the following. There are no absolutely good and there are no absolutely bad species, because each and every species always consists of individuals. Okay, point made. She did refer to, some type of event that took place 200 years ago, which is interesting. Also, do I get the feeling, and this might just be me, but let me know if you also have a similar sense, but this is written more eloquently than the last one. And I don't know, this is actually, I should have mentioned that before. This is translated by a different person, and that could be why. So that explains why this one's a little easier to read than the past, Lacerda parts. Question. In the letters that I got, there was often the question whether you could go into any greater detail regarding the advanced physics that you commented on last time. Many people said your words made no sense. For example, how do UFOs function? How do they fly? How do they perform the maneuvers they do? Great question. Because I also felt like in the comments, there were a lot of people that were like, no, nothing you're saying adds up. And there are a lot of smart people who watch these videos. So I'm glad that you guys are paying attention. The answer is a long one. All right. Answer. I ought to explain that to people? That's not all that simple. Let me think about it for a minute. I always have to use very simple words in order to make clear to you the basic principles of a higher kind of science. Let's try this. You have to be clear about some fundamental facts. The very first thing is that you must divide up the conception of the physical world because each existence consists of different layers. Let's say, for simplicity's sake, that it consists of a material illusion and a sphere of influence. Translator's note here. No legitimate translation exists for this word, Feldraum. Feld means field and Raum means space or room or expanse. Therefore, I'm translating it as sphere of influence. Okay, Feldraum, sphere of influence. Certain physical conditions are associated only with the realm of the material, as in the concrete, while other and more complicated conditions are associated only with the sphere of influence of our material world. Your conception of the physical world is based upon a simple material illusion. That illusion is further subdivided into 3 elementary or basic conditions of matter. A fourth and very important condition also exists, which you simply pay attention to more or less as you choose. It is the one bordering on the sphere of influence or plasma realm. For you, the theory for a controlled transformation or an elevation of the frequency of matter and the stable existence of this fourth aggregate condition of matter is not very common, or it exists at a very primitive level. As an aside, there are simply 5 states of matter, but the post-plasma state would really be going too far and it would only serve to confuse you. Besides, it is not necessary for an understanding of the basic theory. It is connected with diverse phenomena which you would characterize as paranormal. Okay, we're talking ghosts here, plasma ghosts. Now, back to the essentials. Plasma. Now, with plasma, I don't just mean hot gas, as the concept is generally simplified by your people, but rather I mean a higher aggregate condition of matter. The plasma state of matter is a special form of matter which lies between its real existence and the sphere of influence. That is, a complete loss of mass and pure accretion of energy of various form whenever matter is, quote-unquote, pushed or shoved. Editor's note, no explanation was given for the word push or shoved, as used in the context. Your guess is as good as mine. The fourth state of matter is very important for certain physical conditions, which can be used, for example, to, how should I express this to you, generate anti-gravity. That's a rather strange human word and not really correct, but you ought to understand it better this way. Essentially, in the world of real physics, there are no bipolar forces, but rather only observer-dependent reflective behavior of a single, large, unified force at different levels. When we talk about the quantum field here, the quantum vacuum, with anti-gravity or the displacement of gravitational characteristics into levels, one can, for example, cause apparently solid matter to levitate. This method is employed partly by us and by extraterrestrials, as well as a means of propulsion for their UFOs. You people are moving on a really primitive level towards a similar principle of your secret military projects. But since you have more or less stolen this technology, and it was later falsely passed on to you intentionally by extraterrestrials, you lack the real physical understanding. As a result, you have to struggle with problems of instability and radiation with your UFOs. This is really interesting because the concept of donations comes up a lot in ever since the crashes in the 40s, there have been apparent, and this was also mentioned by David Grush, donations from the extraterrestrials. Like they've just kind of left their craft or their technology here for us to back engineer or to use to help us sort of advance our own technology. But there always seems to be a problem, which is why we're hearing a lot about the psionics and the importance of psionics, because the interface or the interaction with the technology requires a psychic connection, one which perhaps the extraterrestrials have more of a capability of doing. And as mentioned with the podcast and Danny Sheehan, he said there are government programs that are doing assisted psionics, which is using technology, amplifying the signal or amplifying the psychic ability within these people, but also frying their brains at the same time. And that's kind of, maybe what Lacerda is hinting to, that, we don't really have any idea of what we're doing.
And I was sworn to secrecy when I was told about the psionic. It's called psionic assists. That there's a technology that they've got that is amping up the capacities of individuals to do telepathic communication, and it's very dangerous, and it's frying out the brains of people that they're testing.
Go check out that podcast with Danny Sheehan, by the way. Very interesting stuff. According to my information, there have been a great number of deaths of your people because of intense radiation and field disturbances. Don't you agree this is also an example of the business regarding the question of good and evil? You people play with unknown forces and thereby accept the death of colleagues of your own kind, for they are dying for a greater cause, namely for the advancement of your technology, which as a result is being put into place once again for the purpose of war, i.e. for negative pursuits. Now, one can give you the benefit of the doubt that only the least number of your kind have any knowledge about these alien projects, which are, as you explain it, top secret. It was told to you that the higher the ordinal or ranking number of basic matter, the simpler the heightening of the condition, but that is only partially correct. If you can't circumvent these powers, then you're better off not attempting it. But your kind has always been ignorant and has from time immemorial tried to play around with forces which you have not even understood. Why would that ever change? Just a little bit of Lacerda casually talking down to us, which, can't blame her. Now, we're going to talk about the copper fusion business here. This is a topic that was brought up by a few of you who, didn't really understand why copper was necessary here and how the fusion process worked with, the heavy elements that you would need just an insane amount of energy to make that happen. We're going to get into that. I don't much understand it myself, but maybe you guys can help me out. You remember this business of copper fusion? By means of the fluctuation at the right angle with the induced radiation field, copper is fused with other elements. The illusion of matter is fused. The fields in the sphere of influence overlap each other, but the main force would be reflected by that process and would assume a quasi-bipolar character. Okay. The resulting connection in the field would therefore not be stable in the normal condition of matter and unsuited for tasks. As a result, the entire field spectrum is shifted to a higher plasma-like condition, whereby the spectrum comes together with this harsh shifting to the opposite pole side. The word is not correct, of the force field, and it resembles quite closely a gravitational shift. This shifting causes a tilting of the repulsing quasi-bipolar force, which now no longer flows to the interior of the force field, but rather flows partly to the exterior of the field. The result is an interstratifying reflective force field, which is very difficult to modulate with certain technical boundaries in relation to its own characteristics. It can also carry out a multiplicity of tasks, for example. Okay, so hold on. I don't know what to make with sort of any of this. My feeble, meager mind will not comprehend what is being told to me here, so I will be enlisting the help of ChatGPT. There's some complicated math going on here, or science, or physics. Can you please dumb it down for me as if I was in grade 7?
About advanced technology, like those used in UFOs, that can create powerful energy fields. These fields are dangerous and hard to control, leading to accidents when people experiment with them. The text also mentions a process where copper is combined with other elements using a special energy field, which changes how the material behaves, almost like using magnets to change metal properties. Additionally, these energy fields can make objects float or become invisible, and they might even allow things to pass through solid objects under the right conditions. Finally, it suggests that what we see as reality might just be a surface illusion, with everything being part of a much deeper and complex universe. Does that help clarify things?
Unfortunately, yes, it does. Okay. So that's interesting because a lot of what was said there, and we'll keep reading this last little part here, but a lot of what was said there is kind of been repeated. Now, I went to the South by Southwest premiere of Age of Disclosure, and in that documentary, Hal Puthoff, a famous physicist who's worked with the government for a long time, and Eric Davis also, talked about the propulsion system in layman's terms, and it resembled a lot of what we're hearing in this text, namely the part where once you create this shift, you can travel essentially through solid objects. Now, we see transmedium crafts, or we hear about them entering and exiting orbit and our atmosphere and going into water. But what that also means, if they can travel frictionlessly through water and air and atmosphere, they can also do that through solid stone or metal. And that is wildly, wildly perplexing. It can also exert a camouflage function in the realm of electromagnetic radiation, as well as manipulate temporal sequences of events. Indeed, only to very limited extent, and other things as well. Are you familiar with your quantum tunnel effect? Even the amplitude equalizations among genuine matter can be achieved with one of these kinds of fields if its frequency and the distance from the plane of the field are high enough. Unfortunately, the whole thing that I have explained to you in your words has come out to be rather primitive, I'm afraid. It sounds rather strange and certainly impossible for your comprehension, but perhaps this simple explanation can be of some use to you in helping you to understand. But then again, maybe not. Yeah. No, I still had to run it through ChatGPT, Lacerda. You are absolutely correct. But also very convenient that you're like, I can explain this, but you'll never understand it. And there's no way that I can really explain it to you for your meager minds to comprehend. Also a really good way to sort of get away with just talking about some BS. Question, is there a scientific substantiation for paranormal powers, as for example, with your powers of thought? Before we get into this, my hypothesis is going to be the manipulation of this Feldraum, or this quantum field, and access to that quantum field. I think time doesn't exist there, neither does space, and so if you have access to that, you can probably have access to essentially the Akashic records. Answer, yes. In order to explain that, one has to acknowledge the physical reality of the sphere of influence, the Feldraum. I'll try to do it. Wait just a second. You are going to have to separate yourself mentally from the illusion that which you see is the true nature of the universe. It is, at best, the surface of a side. Imagine for yourself that all the matter here, you, this table, this pencil, this technical device, this paper, does not really exist, but that it is rather only the result of a field oscillation and a concentration of energy. All matter that you see, every creature, every planet, every star in this universe, has an information energy equivalent in the sphere of influence, which is located on a main field, the general level of things. Now, there is not only level 1, but several. Last time, I had mentioned that highly developed species, which is capable of changing levels, which is something completely different from the simple bubble changing, for bubbles are a part of each and every level. Do you understand? Dimensions, as you call them, are a part of a solitary bubble. Bubbles, or universal foam, are a part of a level, and levels are layers in the sphere of influence, while the sphere of influence, acting in the capacity of a single physical size, is essentially unending. It is composed of innumerable information energy layers and general levels. There are, in the sphere of influence, no null levels. All are the same, but they are separated by means of energy conditions. I notice that I am confusing you now. I think I ought to stop with this explanation. Thank you. Thank you, Lacerda. I appreciate this. And no, I was completely following all of that, but, I understand if the other mortal minds, who are paying attention might not be capting everything that you're saying. Question, no, please continue. Great. How do concrete paranormal powers arise? Okay. This is interesting, though. The bubble stuff, the layer stuff, like the planes of existence, it is cool that not only is our reality made of physical and non-physical, that the non-physical layers also have layers, that the non-physical realities aren't the only realities either. Like, that's just such a hard concept to even comprehend when the only thing that we can barely comprehend is the physical. Well, okay then, let's try something simpler. It is not completely correct, but let's begin in this manner. Tangible matter, on this side, is mirrored in the sphere of influence, the Feldraum, as a field with distinct layers. These layers contain information, as an example, about the simple structure of matter or the string frequency, but also there is stored information stemming from the development of matter. Are you familiar with the human concept of morphogenic fields? One part of the layer could be designated as such. Now, there is still another intermediary layer for which you, unfortunately, have no human concept, since the theory is not common in human thinking. Let's call it a para-layer. For this layer is mainly responsible for everything which you call psi and paranormal, and which lies outside the boundaries of your primitive science. The paralayer lies between the layers of matter and the morphogenic layers of a field in the sphere of influence. It can actively integrate with both. Your body, for example, is mirrored as a field in the sphere of influence, the Feldraum. I love this idea. So, what's really interesting here is that we're saying, okay, there's a mirrored reality, one which is physical sort of information, among other things, and one that is sort of this non-physical interpretation of the physical, like they're mirrored. And, I've had several out-of-body experiences. If you haven't looked at that documentary that I did about the whole gateway process that I did, I went out of body probably half a dozen times. And, saw myself laying in the bed. But the room that I was in, although was my room, was slightly askew. There were elements in the room that appeared larger, smaller, closer, further, fuzzier, just in weirder locations, but it did seem like my room, although there were slight differences. And so even in Bob Monroe's book, he mentions that this other reality is like an 80% match to ours. So I do think that this is really interesting that we're talking about some type of like mirrored reality that isn't quite exact. That doesn't mean that it does not also exist here as well as flesh, blood, bones in the form of matter strings or atoms. But not only that, existence is always a duality. Some layers of the field contain simple information about the solid matter of your body and its frequency, while other layers contain information about your spirit, your consciousness, or speaking from a human religious point of view, your soul. Awareness or consciousness in this case is a simple energy matrix divided into different layers of your field in the sphere of influence, nothing more, nothing less. Genuine awareness can also exist here on the matter side, but only in the form of post-plasma, the fifth form of matter. With the necessary physical knowledge and the corresponding technology, the consciousness/awareness matrix, or soul, can also be separated from its field of rest. It can, despite its removal, continue to exist in a self-sufficient manner for a certain amount of time. That has the strange occult name of soul robbing. But above all, we're talking about science here, not about magic or dark forces. Okay. So here's a comment by Ola K. He comments on the soul robbing because it was in quotations. And he said,
The kind who will love me just the way
I've just arrived at the Monroe Institute. We are currently in or near Nelliesford, Virginia, where I came to meet Joe McMoneagle almost a year ago, actually. And right now I'm in my very own room. So this is the bed. They've got these kind of pods. These are known as check units, or controlled holistic environmental chambers. These units were meant to make you go to sleep quicker and give you a deeper sleeping experience while making you feel more alert and refreshed when you wake up due to the isolation provided by the blackout curtains, sound deadening walls, and as well as the integrated speakers, volume control, and headphones in each unit. Never been on a retreat. This is a first for me. It is kind of counterintuitive to be at a retreat with so much camera gear, but everybody staying here is also filming their experience, and that's what this whole sort of creator retreat is about. We're going to be meeting other creators here during the week, interviewing them, but I'm going to take you through every single part of the process as much as I can, as much as I'm allowed to, and figure out how to leave my body.
Okay, my full name is Arcaides Escarmendi. My nickname is Archie, and what I do mainly is to train Monroe Institute programs for about 17 years now. It wasn't on my radar to be a trainer. I just wanted to be a participant, come here, have the experience. So I had my job, and this was like, something I would do for fun. Mm-hmm. But then before I knew, it became biggest part of my life.
You've had out-of-body experiences.
Yes.
Can you talk us through the very first one?
I think I was like 16 at the time. And I was totally oblivious to the concept of out-of-body experiences. And I was reading a book, and I can't even remember which book it was, and it wasn't dedicated to the out-of-body experience, but there was like a tiny paragraph talking about it. And then like a very brief technique on how to do it. And it was just a few words. So there wasn't much of a technique there anyway, but I was fascinated. I was like, is it real? If this is real, I want to try. So I tried and I tried and I tried every night. And all of a sudden, one night, I started feeling this vibration. And it started at my feet, and then started creeping up my feet. And I had heard about the vibrations, like this is, for some people, is the beginning of the out-of-body experience. So I was really excited. But then it sort of reached my midsection and I freaked out. And I remember my heartbeat went from very, very slow because I was in a very deep trance to super fast. And then I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, am I going to have a heart attack now? So then I eventually got used to those vibrations. So I eventually let them take over my whole body. And I knew it was going to be okay. And my heartbeat was fine. And it was just fear initially. And then eventually it popped out. And I wouldn't go very far. I would just maybe walk a few steps in my room and then look back and see my body laying there in bed. That freaked me out, to be honest. And then eventually I ventured out of the window. And the one thing I remember more distinctly is being in front of the glass, in front of the window, and thinking, I'm going to do this really, really slowly. And looking at my hand and thinking, can I stick my hand through the glass? And sure enough, I could. And I did it very slowly so I could feel it. And you can actually feel it. The feeling was like there was some slight resistance, but you could still get it through. And then, I would get out of the window and just fly away. Yeah, over the years, I had them in all colors and shapes. But the one main thing I got from the out-of-body experience is the absolute knowledge that I would transcend physical mortality. And it's such a strong knowing. It's not a belief anymore. You just know. And you cannot go back to not knowing. And being aware of your own immortality, that's huge. That's a huge, huge life changer. Only for that, it's well worth it.
It is now nighttime. We had orientation and got to learn about the program. They're going to play a proprietary frequency in our ears. And this is going to be the first exercise. And it's playing now. So here we go. I'm in my own little pod. In a second, I'm going to turn the lights off. And I'm going to get these headphones on. And this will be my first experience trying to expand my state of awareness. See you guys on the other side. Okay, so that wasn't so much like an out-of-body experience thing that we did, but mostly just they call it a resonant tuning exercise. So they ended up playing this low humming, sort of like home, and you hum along with it. Super relaxing. Like, I gotta admit, like, my head's buzzing right now in a good way. And I'm not normally someone who meditates. God, that scared me. If I don't get anything from this experience at all, I think I'll just be more relaxed. And honestly, I could use that. Day 1. Slept like a baby. It's now 6 a.m. People are going to start getting up. No crazy dreams to report. All night long, constantly playing this frequency while you're sleeping. It's kind of nice. It's like a white noise. But then I think around 6:30, there's music, and then there's tuning frequency. After that, morning exercise, breakfast, 9 a.m., the day begins. And I think we start our first real exercise. After the exercise, we all gather together in like this common area, and we're going to debrief. And some of us are more experienced and have had a ton of outer body experiences, apparently. And others, like me, have only maybe had one accidentally. But I don't think that those are going to be filmed. I think one of them is going to be filmed when we all agree to like sort of share something, maybe on day 2 or 3. But for now, it is a pretty personal and private thing. So we're not going to invade anyone's privacy. But here it is. Day 1. This is the yoga room. A beautiful day outside.
And for a little I was sad.
Over here, we got a cabin outside.
The one to check you will be I still
Listen to that. Morning coffee. Sat in the mountains. Listen to that. I've never been on a retreat before. This is a first for me. So when I had my out-of-body experience, it was terrifying. It was a scary, scary moment. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, how that's totally normal. I felt weirdly validated that it's happened to someone else here, and they've also had a similar experience in that when, as soon as they left their body, they got terrified and shot right back into their body, and that's exactly what happened to me. So even that is to me almost like, oh, this happens to other people. This is a real thing that's happening. This isn't just a dream. There's a distinct difference between a lucid dream. I have lucid dreams where I can fly, where I can do whatever I want, and what happened to me that night, or those 2 nights. And I think the main difference is the realization that while I was in it, I felt it was real, and afterwards, I also still felt it was real. Normally a dream, I can discern and differentiate and afterwards be like, yeah, that was a dream. Even the first 5-10 seconds after you wake up from a dream, you still think it's real, and you're like, oh, that might be, oh, is this real? And then you kind of snap out of the haze, and you're like, no, that was clearly a dream. But this, to this day, I still think was not a dream. It was more than a dream. It was different. It felt different. I felt this weird vibration. It was just really profound and really different. And to know that I might be able to recreate that moment is a bit scary. But the more I talk to people here, the more I realize that I just have to kind of embrace it and hopefully let it just happen. Over the next few days, we'll be going through a process called entrainment. Entrainment is where one system syncs up with another system. So when we talk about brainwave entrainment, we refer to the way our brainwaves can match the rhythm of an external stimulus like sound or light. One common method for brainwave entrainment is using binaural beats. The Monroe Institute spent decades measuring brainwave frequencies during different states of consciousness. So while you're asleep, while you're focused, while you're dreaming. And by doing this, they were able to identify very specific patterns that your brainwaves go through when in these altered states. Using entrainment and binaural beats, they were able to create this sound technology known as hemispheric synchronization, which allowed them to replicate what the brain waves were doing during these altered states. Here's how binaural beats work. So basically, there are 2 slightly different tones in each ear. For example, if you listen to 300 hertz in your left ear and 310 hertz in your right ear, your brain will process a third one. The third one is the difference between the 2 frequencies, which in this case is 10 hertz. Now, normally you could not hear 10 hertz, so your brain actually synthesizes this. This 10 hertz difference creates a beat that your brain starts to follow, and this beat can influence your brain waves, making them align with the beat's frequency. Different frequencies can promote different states of mind, like relaxation, focus, or sleep. And then the brain has 2 hemispheres, and entrainment helps synchronize their activity. This means that both sides of your brain start to work together more harmoniously, and this synchronization can improve cognitive functions and emotional balance. So by using binaural beats, you can guide your brain into specific states. For example, lower frequencies like 1 to 4 hertz are associated with deep sleep, while higher frequencies like 13 to 30 are linked to alertness and concentration. And every day for the next week, we will be listening to a variety of different sound patterns to activate different states of awareness and consciousness in our brains. But now we're going into our first session. We're going to do, I think, 3 back to back to back. So I'm back in the pod for until lunch doing these sessions. The people I've spoken to here have been just so cool in sharing their own experiences, really inspiring, because you hear about literally people leaving their body and being like, oh, I'm walking through the wall, through the roof, through the floor. And it just really makes me want to have that experience. I'm hoping I get to have it. But yeah, we'll see what comes of it. The first one we end up learning is Focus 10. They refer to this as mind awake, body asleep. In Focus 10, your mind remains fully conscious and alert. You're aware of your surroundings and your thoughts, much like you are when you're awake. While your mind stays awake, your body enters a deeply relaxed state that is almost like sleep. your muscles relax completely, and you may lose the sensation of your physical body. So the purpose of Focus 10 is to create a state where your consciousness is free from the physical constraints of your body. And this particular state is often used as a starting point for OBEs, deep meditation, and other explorations of consciousness.
Okay. That was incredibly relaxing. I was very close to being asleep, and I felt like at one point I was asleep, but then I got jerked back into whatever that state is between sleep and being awake. It was so bizarre because at one point he's counting down he's counting up to 10. As he's counting, this frequency that he's playing is sort of coming in stronger and stronger. And when that was happening, I felt my entire body vibrating, is the only way I can put it, buzzing. And they told me that buzzing and that vibrating was like right when you're about to let go and leave your body. I started getting subconsciously, I think, excited about that. I was like, oh, it's happening. And that just withdrew me from that feeling. So that feeling only lasted about 5 to 10 seconds, I feel, maybe longer. So I never felt like I left my body, but I did 100% unequivocally feel this vibration throughout my entire body, this buzzing. Everything that I intended to happen on this first exercise happened. By the way, this is the setup here. So we have a volume button here. This is for the music that plays out of these speakers on both sides of the bed. Then we have this switch, which I will turn off. That is the light that tells the control room that I'm ready to receive these frequencies. This is just a light switch for this part of the room, and that's the audio jack for the headphones. So I do feel refreshed. I do feel like I'm in a good mood, stress-free. It is really relaxing. So, all right. We are now debriefed. We went to a room. I felt like I could observe my body from a conscious state without being a part of it. And that kind of scared me. It was like last like 5 seconds. It was very short. And I mentioned that, and they said that's totally normal. And that the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be with that feeling, and the less your rational brain's going to kick in and try to, shock you back into your system, so to speak. There's different frequencies. They're going to be playing the number 10, which is the same one we just went through.
If you're ready, light, and we will begin shortly.
Okay, I gotta go. All right. No major changes to report, but when we went from the conscious state and then back in, I felt a notable difference in my state of consciousness. I was conscious the whole time, so I didn't pass out, which is great. There was a point I had this intense feeling, this intense tingling in my body, and I felt my body lighter than before, and I felt like I could lift out of my body. Like I felt like it was starting to lift out of my body. And, people are saying by Thursday, that's when like the real intense stuff, starts to happen. So we'll see.
My name is Maya Gray. I've been here. Well, first time I came to the Monroe Institute, it was 2012. I came as a participant and I was hooked. And recently, 2 years ago, I became a residential trainer, which means now I can do long programs. I can do them here. I can do them in Europe.
I want to ask you, what was your first experience with an OBE?
Well, I've been having spontaneous ones since I was a child, and I never thought that it's something special. I thought everybody can do that. Until at some point I realized that probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it stopped for me then.
Really?
Yes. So there's so many people in here, like they had these amazing experiences and they carried it through life. Like I decided, no, I don't want to be this loony, sensitive person. I want to be rational. I want to be down to earth. I will have things under my control. So I shut it off completely. I became this cynical, sarcastic person. I had a beautiful career. Because that mindset that I adopted, like, I'm going to go and get it, that worked.
Yeah.
So I had an amazing career in a multinational company, like really, I had so many people under me working for me. And I went on vacation. It was in Bali. I was sitting in the most expensive hotel that I could find, like, you know, cocktails and everything. And I was sitting there like, there has to be a different kind of happiness because I did everything they told me. Like, I got a job, I have an apartment, I have a huge car, like I have a social life, I can go out, I can travel, I can do all these things that money can buy and more. Why am I not happy then? So at that time, Eat, Pray, Love came out. And since I was in Bali, and that book is part in Bali, the book was all over the place. So I got the book, I read it, and I was like, meditation, that's what I should do. Like, really, I had no idea what meditation is. Like, no, not a clue. But I thought, I will go meditate, and I will show them how to do it. Like, I will be so good at meditation, they will be blown away.
I'm going to be the best meditator.
Yes. And so I went. I went to India, to Osho ashram. So from the moment I landed in India to the time I arrived to the ashram, it was less than 24 hours. In these 24 hours, I was nearly raped, I was robbed, I was cheated, I was taken in circles, like everything happened. And I was like, this place, I'm going home. Like, what is this? But then I got to ashram. There's like a mandatory practice that you have to go to. And I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. You have to. They push me in there, and it's like 3-hour long process. And I'm in there, and I know what is happening. I have no idea rationally. I have never heard of it. I've never read anything about it. Like, I don't know what meditation is, right? But I am there, and I know. In India, they have, Osho has a lot of dynamic meditations. And there's one dynamic meditation, the dynamic meditation. It's 1 hour long, and it's physically challenging. So if you try to do that physically, you will fail. The only way to do it is energetically, like as a meditation. And so I am doing that meditation. And there's one place where you're, for 15 minutes, you're standing like this. And I'm standing like this, and suddenly I realize that I'm standing behind myself.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it only lasted a second, of course, because like,
yeah,
what happened? But ever since then, I was really going for that meditation, and that slowly started coming back. And then Monroe happened, and then these experiences, they just came back. But see, that's what they all tell you. It's not a big deal.
Good morning. It is now day 2. Today, by the way, I think we're going to be learning a different focus level. So yesterday was focus level 10, and today we're going to be learning a different frequency, or listening to a different frequency. So yesterday was focus 10, and I look forward to seeing what frequency we're going to be listening to today, and I'll keep you posted. We then moved on to focus 12, which represents a specific state of expanded awareness. In focus 12, your awareness extends beyond your physical body and the immediate environment.